This is CBC Vancouver News.
If I had to guess, I would say that it was a largely political decision.
A BC judge pauses a law banning drug use in some public spaces.
We're going to review the impact of this court decision.
The province says treating addiction and public safety are key. Plus,
I went back out to the guy in the parking lot and said, no, I'm going to pay after the weekend.
a Vancouver Island man warns about scammers he says paved his driveway. A company in Ontario says they're using its name. And seriously? From complaints about haircuts to lost nose rings. We share the top 10 nuisance calls to 911 in BC. For joining us, a BC Supreme Court judge has put a pause on legislation banning drug use in public spaces, citing irreparable harm. The province was several months into a 3-year decriminalization pilot when the NDP government brought in the restrictions. As Mira Baines reports, those rules banned illegal substance use in public parks, transit stops, and beaches.
Living in a tent in Vancouver's downtown east side, David Pigott says he has nowhere else to go. Last month, BC passed a new law banning drug use in public spaces like parks. Now the BC Supreme Court has pressed pause on the law.
I don't know how I feel about that because I use in my tent and so that it's not out in the open, and my biggest concern is kids.
The province was working to decriminalize some amounts of illicit drugs to help deal with the overdose crisis. But in the face of pressure from communities, it banned drug use on beaches, at transit stops, and in front of businesses. That makes it more dangerous, say advocates for drug users, because it pushes them to use drugs in isolation, away from life-saving services.
If I had to guess, I would say that it was a largely political decision. And with all due respect, I think it was one very deeply rooted in stigma.
Some communities who say they're overwhelmed by crime are disappointed.
I think the vast majority of British Columbians are really very tired and frustrated by the open use of drugs that they know eventually and often prove deadly to their fellow citizens.
A big concern, whether police could force drug users to leave public spaces.
Our members no longer had the authority to ask someone to leave in the rare circumstances where they do find them using illicit drugs in problematic circumstances, like in places, for example, where children are likely to be found.
The province says treating addiction while addressing public safety concerns are key to how BC moves forward.
We're going to review the impact of this court decision and possible responses by the government.
The court will take until the end of March to look at whether the public use ban violates charter rights. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Health officials say 2 children have now died from flu-related illnesses in BC.
So these are quite concerning, especially because these are rare events usually, and they are quite tragic. And so, we watch these quite closely and try and investigate them because they give us a sense of what's happening with the influenza season.
The BC Centre for Disease Control says flu in children is at the highest level since the start of this flu season. They're reminding you to get vaccinated to avoid getting really sick and stay home if you feel ill. 4 people have now been killed in 2 separate crashes on Highway 5 north of Kamloops as of yesterday. There have been more than a dozen deaths on that highway this year. RCMP and Highway Patrol are currently on Highway 5 to ensure safe driving this holiday weekend. Local leaders say the grim toll is having a serious effect on first responders. Well, much of Highway 1 in Chilliwack was closed for the day after a big crash. The RCMP says a truck full of vegetables rolled over near the Prest Road overpass, spilling veggies all over the highway. No injuries have been reported. At last check, Highway 1 eastbound is still closed. Traffic has been diverted onto exit ramps. Winnipeg police say they have shot and killed a man during a hostage situation on Thursday. They claim that man was a suspect in the death of a BC truck driver who disappeared in Winnipeg a week ago. Zubina Ahmed has more.
Dozens of officers outside, a hostage situation inside. Winnipeg police blocked streets around this West Broadway apartment Thursday afternoon. A man had taken a 19-year-old woman into a third-floor suite against her will.
We'd reason to believe the male that retreated was armed.
Police say another woman, a man and a child were also inside Furby Street apartment. The man escaped off the balcony and the woman and child were released. Just after 5, police broke down the door and went inside.
The female hostage was secured and safely taken into care. The male hostage taker was shot by police during the rescue, and he died at the scene.
It was tense hours for the people living in the block. Dennis Colored has lived here for more than a decade.
About 1 in the afternoon, I started with a whole bunch of screaming, and I ended up looking through the peephole and saw a police officer walking down the hallway. And from there, it just started banging on the door, and it very quickly escalated from there. Here, a man screaming, yelling, and a woman screaming along with him, I guess she was trying to get out of the apartment.
Police say the hostage taker was known to them.
He is a 52-year-old male. He had an extensive criminal record for violence and weapons offenses. He was on a few weapons prohibitions at the time of this offense.
This was not the first time police were at the building this week. On Wednesday, officers were there investigating a homicide on the 5th floor.
The hostage taker is considered a person of interest for that homicide.
The homicide victim is a 34-year-old truck driver, Farah Mohammed. He was reported missing on December 22nd after making a delivery from Vancouver to Winnipeg. His body was found on Boxing Day inside the same apartment block. No arrests have been made in connection to his death, and the homicide unit is investigating. Sabina Ahmed, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A North Saanich man wants to warn others after he says he was nearly scammed by 2 men who paved his driveway. And as Karis Hogg reports, a business owner in Ontario says the scammers are doing shoddy work under his company's name.
2 weeks ago, a man knocked on Jim Gower's door and offered to repave his driveway. He said he worked for Flocon Construction.
Said he had some recycled asphalt that he could spread on our driveway at a good cost.
Gower agreed to the work, but the men paved far more than he wanted and tried charging him far more than he expected. They then followed Gower to the bank so he could pay them right away. That's when Gower started to feel uneasy.
And I got as far to the bank and said to the teller, I'm here to pick up a bank draft for $10,000 to pay this guy who's waiting out in the parking lot. And she said, well, you're obviously under a lot of pressure. You should maybe think about it. And eventually I went back out to the guy in the parking lot and said, no, I'm going to pay after the weekend.
Gower says the men haven't returned. And since they left no contact information, Gower and his daughter looked up the only name they gave, Flocon Construction. Online, they found a company by that name all the way in Ontario and talked to the owner, George Flores. Flores says recently he's had 4 to 5 calls from people in BC who say that they've been scammed by people using his company's name.
I'm getting phone calls, like I said, threatening to sue me, to find out where I live. And it's because, and I have to explain to them, like, it's not me. I'm like, I'll send you my location services. Please Google me. And they're like, yes, I did. And you're the only thing that pops up. So obviously these people are just taking my name and they don't have any credentials.
Last week, Nanaimo RCMP warned the public of a group targeting West Shore, Sydney, and Victoria, scamming homeowners out of thousands of dollars.
And I thought, wow, it's really important to let people know that this is in our neighborhood. It's, that my dad experienced people driving up and down our road and spotting his driveway and coming to him.
If you are approached by someone you think is suspicious, Nanaimo RCMP is warning people not to accept offers of yard work or repairs and to report the incident to police. Karis Hogg, CBC News, Vancouver.
Unseasonably warm temperatures have put a damper on one of the busiest weeks of the year at Whistler Blackcomb. Some skiers and snowboarders are sharing their frustrations online, but as John Hernandez tells us, operators claim conditions are improving by the day.
Warm and wet in the Whistler Village means a lot less powder than many here would hope for.
It's been kind of rainy. I haven't seen a lot of snow.
There's not a lot of it up there right now.
Unseasonably high temperatures driven by El Nino means there's no shortage of disappointment during peak season at Whistler Blackcomb. Nancy Howe and her family traveled from Arkansas to be here.
We'd hope that they would be a bit better, like a few more fluffy flakes.
This couple from California, understandably underwhelmed.
This was our first time, so we had heard great things about it, and I'm sure it's beautiful when it's covered in snow, but we just picked a crappy weekend, I think.
According to the mountain, the warm weather means a third of the lifts and just over half of the terrain are still closed.
Didn't really enable us to make a lot of snow. We've got some ski outs, but it was challenging to complete all the ski out routes down to the valley.
Over the past week, users took to social media to vent over snow conditions and congestion, but Vail Resorts says that doesn't paint the entire picture.
What they're showing is the ski outs in the valley, and that's very, very small percentage of the total footprint that we have up here. So it doesn't really represent the total experience that's available.
While there is snow on the peaks and at higher elevations, the overall user experience is mixed.
Yeah, you can have fun in it with the right board and if you know what to do.
It's not overly bad, but mid-station down, it's spring break skiing and it's a little rough on your thighs.
Would you say it's worth it with the snow conditions, like buying a lift ticket?
No, I don't think so, no.
Why not?
There's no snow and we need some snow.
Operators say there's signs conditions will improve into the new year. Environment Canada says it's possible, but far from a guarantee.
It's not looking like it's going to be a really strongly snow-driven January.
Still, even if fresh snow is in short supply, many here are still finding the silver lining.
We don't get snow in Arkansas like this, and we love to ski, and we're with family, so you make the best of what it is.
Sean Hernandez, CBC News, Whistler.
Dialing 911 in an emergency may seem obvious, but call takers are once again reminding you what an actual emergency is. ECOM has released its annual list of the top 10 nuisance calls to 911 this year. Our Zara Premji joins us now to share a list you don't want to be on. Zara, what were the shockers this year?
Well, Dan, there were actually plenty of shockers for you to take a look at. So as you can see, it's quite the varied list. Calling police because the traffic light was taking too long turning green. Your Uber Eats order was taking too long. And hey, the burger joint wasn't open when they were not supposed to be open. And let's not forget the McDonald's order was taking too long. While the list can seem comical, if you do call 911 for something like this, you could actually be slowing down a response to an actual emergency, be it a life-threatening injury, a shooting, or a robbery. Here are three that really stood out. All right, so you've got over here asking for directions home from the Drake concert. That was #1 on the top 10. This one, lost a nose ring down the shower drain. Not sure I've heard that one before in the list. And #3 that really stood out, the barber gave someone a bad haircut.
Zara, if someone calls 911 for something that is not an emergency, like we just heard, what then?
Well, Dan, the problem is call takers say no matter how absurd a call might be on the surface, they must treat every 911 call as an emergency until they can confidently determine otherwise. So every second that you're spending calling, talking about your fallen nose ring could actually be hindering a call from someone in a life-threatening situation.
This is why we are doing this campaign, just so we can sort of make people aware of what would be a nuisance call into 911, so we can keep those 911 lines free for in-progress crimes and emergencies that require immediate action.
ECOM says it saw a 13% increase in 911 call volume this year alone, handling more than 2 million calls so far in 2023. So the calls aren't going down, and they're asking British Columbians to be mindful and not call about things that are on this list.
Very good advice. Zara Premji, thanks very much.
We're also doing things like reining in the excesses of short-term rentals like Airbnb.
Coming up, we chat with Premier David Eby about how he thinks his party has handled major issues, housing, the drug crisis, and immigration this year. That's coming up. Thanks for joining our commercial-free live stream on this Friday. There are lots of ways to look back on the year that was. One of them is through Vancouver's most viral social media moments. Our social media manager, Maurice Katz, gave Amy Bell the lowdown and the breakdown on BC Today. Have a listen.
On our TikTok, actually garnered 6.5 million views. So we're talking about worldwide viral. This was when a prominent hip-hop artist in Canada, Drake, was scheduled to come to Vancouver, and for his first of 2 concerts, he canceled 2 hours before the show started.
That he did.
And understandably, Vancouverites were quite upset. Let's take a listen.
Okay.
I'm very sad. Been here since 6:30 in the morning, so yeah, I'm upset.
I planned this months in advance. My car, my B&B, everything was months in advance. I saved a lot of money, and we got here, and we were so happy about it. And just 2 hours before it's supposed to happen, they give us an excuse that the stage wasn't finished.
So the comments are filled with Drake song lyric puns.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm upset being the
Being the
biggest
number
one. And one of the top comments also was that Taylor Swift would never.
Well, Taylor would never, but okay, now that you've mentioned Taylor Swift, I have a feeling that I know what the next viral moment is going to be.
Yeah.
Ms. Swift, it's David Eby, Premier of British Columbia. I'm not accustomed to begging, but for my own constituency of my loving and beautiful wife and my son, Ezra, please come to Vancouver, British Columbia. We'll treat you well.
Well, and then thanks to Evie, or maybe not thanks to Evie, Taylor did announce a concert here in Vancouver, and that started the race to find tickets.
Oh, and that was huge. It's Taylor's taken over. What's another pick for top viral Vancouver moment?
This user went out of his way to create a little art project for himself and took some pictures. He made a miniature version of the blue fence, a miniature version of that redevelopment application around those little gnome houses.
Goodness.
Obviously, this blew up. People loved it. And my favorite touch of the whole thing is that he even put a little piece of graffiti on the redevelopment application, just like they do in real life.
It has been a busy first year in office for BC Premier David Eby. His government launched cost of living credits for people and businesses, and unveiled a bill banning drug use in most public spaces, though that's now on hold by the courts. The province also unveiled big housing legislation. Eby told CBC's On the Island host Gregor Craigie that British Columbians have already started benefiting it from those measures.
So the laws that we just passed in the last session, they are rightly getting a lot of recognition because they are quite transformative about how we build housing, making sure that there's actually housing in single-family neighborhoods that a family would have a prospect of potentially being able to get into. But it's obviously not going to be overnight. So we're not relying entirely on that. We're also doing things like reining in the excesses of short-term rentals like Airbnb. It's having immediate impact. It doesn't come into full force until May. Already people are reaching out and saying, you know, I'm moving into a place that used to be an Airbnb. My colleague Josie just texted me, a friend of hers in Port Alberni, a place across the street was an Airbnb for a long time. Now a young family's moving in as long-term renters.
The toxic drug crisis has also kept the BC government busy. BC's outgoing chief coroner Lisa Lapointe has argued giving controlled drugs to people without prescriptions would help stop more deaths. Eby doesn't agree.
My belief is we need to find those opportunities to intervene, the doctor, nurse practitioner, between the person with the addiction and the predatory drug dealer. But then we need to focus right now on recovery and support for treatment. So we have a seamless treatment initiative at St. Paul's. We have new work with the Canadian Mental Health Association, more than 100 beds that will be opening up to give people that chance to get into treatment, because you just need one mistake with toxic drugs and then you're dead, and or seriously brain injured. And that's what we're dealing with in this province, and it is a huge challenge. And I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I do know that we probably agree on far more than we disagree on in terms of the way forward.
Canada hit a record on national population growth through immigration this year. Meanwhile, EB says immigration is a huge benefit for BC, but has some concerns about international students.
The anxiety I have is that the numbers are such that we can't support these folks. We're seeing significant exploitation by employers, by landlords, by other people of these international students and temporary residents. They don't want to come forward and report it because they're worried they're going to be sent home. And we really need the federal government to be a better partner on this. The numbers are not in control. At the provincial level, we need to, and we are, doing our work around these institutions. And we've passed legislation around the agents working in other countries that are exploiting these students and taking fees from them for the schools that are operating here. But the only way we're going to be able to get our hands around this exploitation issue is if we work with the federal government in partnership. And right now, there's a bit of finger pointing happening from that level at us, when frankly, they really do need to have a serious look at that program, and we'll do our work on our end.
EB also says his government will work in the coming year to make life more affordable for British Columbians. There's a live shot of Georgia Street. Russ's BC-wide weather forecast is next.
Hello. On March 2nd, 2022, I went into labor while only 21 weeks and 5 days pregnant. At the local community hospital that I was admitted to, we were told that we would lose the babies as they would be born that same day and they were not viable, so they would not survive and no efforts could be done to keep them alive.
Shortly after, a friend messaged me and sent me this Instagram video of a mom who had gone into gestation at the same gestational age, and a second picture of her with 3-year-old twins now thriving. And so for me, that was my sign of hope. And through getting in touch with her, I found out also about Mount Sinai, which is a hospital that helps resuscitate preemies at that age.
And this account is called 22 Matters. They're an organization that advocates for 21-weekers and 22-weekers to be given life-sustaining measures. 1 hour after midnight on March 4th, 2022, when I crossed into the 22 weeks and 0 days mark in my pregnancy, Adia was born first at 1:22 a.m. She weighed 330 grams. And Adriel was born 23 minutes later, and he weighed 420 grams. They received the Guinness World Record, actually 2 Guinness World Records, one for being the most premature twins in the world to have survived to that age, and secondly for being the lightest twins in the world.
Please don't take my sunshine.
There are things that they have to work harder than other babies on. So, things like even crawling, sitting up, learning how to stand on their own. Good job, baby.
They both have very dynamic personalities, and it's starting to emerge day by day.
That's okay. So considering everything that they have been through, they're doing really well. They're both very active. They love climbing, crawling. Adriel is an explorer. We can't get him to stop climbing all over the furniture. Adia is very sweet. She's a little bit more shy and reserved, but once you get to know her, she is very loving.
I have to bake my grandma a cake. It makes her very proud.
Over this past year, we've had multiple chances to even talk to medical professionals around the world at conferences to raise awareness about the viability of babies born at that age, and this can have important policy changes.
We do hope this is a record that is broken, because that would mean that more babies are given the opportunity to live and thrive.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Enjoy groundbreaking contemporary works of theatre, dance, music, and multimedia at the annual Push International Performing Arts Festival, January 19th to February 4th. For the festival program and tickets, visit pushfestival.ca. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox and keep connected with us.
If you want to work out with a sweet treat, try making mochi. The Nikkei National Museum and Japanese Gardeners Association hosted a mochi-making event in celebration of Japanese New Year. One organizer warns it has to be earned, and it's worth it.
Mochi typically happens for the New Year, and it's a community event, so people get together and they work together to make a mochi. It does take quite a bit of strength and effort, so about after your fourth or fifth time, your arms get pretty sore.
This fluffy and moist, chewy rice cake, and it stretches out like cheese, but it's almost got a very subtle sweet flavor to it. And with addition to certain things like sugar and kinako and red bean, it all just starts to change its texture and its flavors.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
As we barrel into the end of 2023, meteorologist Russ Lacade is going to paint us a BC-wide weather picture, and things are turning a little bit colder. You've been talking about this.
Yeah, we've kind of hinted at it the past few days, and largely what I'm referring to, Dan, is sort of long-range computer models and just hoping that they turn out. But we're seeing a little evidence on the actual satellite loop right now that those computer models may have things figured out. The jet stream for the past several days diving to the south over the eastern Pacific, gathering up that subtropical moisture near the Hawaiian Islands and just driving it all the way up the American coastline and the BC coastline as well, setting record highs locally with all the rain. What's happening now? A little fork in that jet stream, the main thrust pushing towards coastal California. It sort of moves this jet stream farther offshore in the days ahead, weakens it, and allows colder Arctic air to descend into northern BC. That's only a few days away. Of course, our short-term forecast over the next 12 to 24 hours, we've got some rain coming ashore, and it shows up in our computer model forecast. I want to show you something here. I'm kind of running through another 7-day computer model with rain coming in, valid for midnight tonight. Dry conditions again all across the interior. That changes a little bit as we get into early January, but not for the first day of the new year. This is your forecast for the 1st of January at midday. Nice and dry, some breaks of sun locally. Longer range picture through Wednesday of next week starts to turn colder and unstable. A little snow over the central interior as well by the end of next week. So 7 days from now, we're looking at temperatures 25, 30 below in the northeast part of the province, 15 to 20 below in the central interior, sub-zero in the southern interior with a chance of some snow, and that's kind of a close call locally here. Your Metro Vancouver forecast. Enjoy New Year's Eve. It dries out on New Year's Eve, a beautiful New Year's Day as well. Near normal temperatures next week. Maybe something interesting on the radar by Friday.
It's never boring. And Russ, early but Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, Dan.
And that is your late news for Friday. Thank you for joining us tonight, this week, and this year. For news anytime, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is tomorrow morning at 6:30 on CBC Radio 1, and Janella Hamilton will be here with your late news at 10:30 after hockey. I will see you next Wednesday. We're going to leave you tonight with some of the most iconic photos taken by our CBC photographers in 2023. Good night, stay safe, Happy New Year.